Okay, so hello everyone. I thought today I wanted to share just a very brief tutorial about the pelvis, the base of the pelvis. I know from working with a number of clients and talking to a number of people that it's actually quite hard to have a sense of where your pelvis is and the different parts of the pelvis. And I know I talk a lot about untucking the tailbone because a lot of people tend to kind of hang into their lower back and don't really have a sense of how they can move from their hip joints. And I think that's something I see with a lot of people, especially people with long-term disc issues, lower back disc issues. And I wanted to share an idea that I learned recently from reading Mary Bond's book. I know I can't get enough of Mary Bond at the moment. And it's about this idea of the pelvic diamond, which is the thinking about the floor of the pelvis. And of course, we talk a lot about pelvic floor in Pilates, and we're often talking about engaging it and drawing it in. And I felt that she had a very interesting perspective on the floor of the pelvis, because a lot of people have dysfunction in that area for whatever reason, social anxiety, sometimes it's related to sexual issues, and sometimes it's related to just habits of posture, which in themselves perhaps come out of psychological feelings, emotions. So it's not a simple thing, but I wanted to share my thoughts after reading Mary Bond's work and thinking differently about how we can have just a better sense of alignment coming from the base of the pelvis. Okay, so I'm just going to sit onto a ball just to demonstrate it whilst I talk you through. But you can sit, it doesn't matter what you're sitting on, whether it's a ball or a chair, wherever you are now. And for me, this is quite interesting also because I have a little bit of rotation in my pelvis, so I think maybe that's stuff for another tutorial. But right now, if you just kind of have a sense of how you're sitting, and so a lot of people just tend to slump into the lower back area and kind of sit like this, and the tailbone is what I call tucked under, so it's pointing in that direction forwards, and here there's a lot of loading going into the lower back. Now if you are in this position for long periods of time, what happens is people find that they're not really able to lift out of that, or they don't have access enough to the hip joint to lift out of that. So what happens is they end up with quite lengthened lower backs, but lifting themselves up from their mid back. So it's a kind of poor fix for the equation. So they end up in this sort of position, where push a lot of strain on the neck and shoulders. And the sense is, if we visualize and try and find a little more space in the base of the pelvis, we can align ourselves over that so it creates more length in the back. So just having your feet on the floor, try not to be sitting backwards into your seat, try and sit really comfortably on the floor of the pelvis. So if you just kind of tilt your pelvis backwards towards your sacrum and then forwards towards the pubic bone, and you just do that a few times. I'm not doing it with any particular muscular engagement, just kind of rocking. And you know, this movement is a movement we do a fair amount in Pilates because we're often doing it to mobilize the lower back. So this is just about getting a sense of how your pelvis can move. And then if you just find somewhere in the center and allowing the base of the pelvis, the floor of the pelvis, to just make contact with the chair. It works best if you're sitting on something a little bit soft. So just getting a little bit of sense of what is at the base of your pelvis. So you have between the pubic bone and the tailbone, there's the area of muscles that we call the pelvic floor. And for a lot of people, they're quite restricted. And the other that's forwards and backwards, and on either side there are the sitting bones. So those are the bones that you normally they get quite painful if you're sitting down on a hard surface for a long time. Those are the right at the base of the pelvis. So if you can visualize between these four bony points, the pubic bone at the front, the tailbone at the back, and the sitting bones on either side, there is this kind of diamond shape. And we want to try and just kind of spread that diamond a little bit, and just get a sense of really opening up that area. And just see how that has changed your back. For me, it brings my lower back into a slightly more significant lordosis, which is perfectly healthy. And it just feels so much easier to sit like this. I can sit for a long time. And now, from there, just get a gentle engagement of the pelvic floor muscles. And this is seeing that diamond shape kind of narrowing a little bit. And the back portion of that diamond narrowing gives you a little more sensation of the sitting bone glute connection. And if you can connect more into the front of that diamond, it gives you more tone into the front of your belly. You get more sensation into the lower abdominal area. So I think it's quite interesting to play with opening that diamond and then gently connecting, but not tightening. And it's really important also to remember that a lot of people are quite kind of into the idea of engaging the pelvic floor. And what I've noticed from watching and observing and talking to people is that the people who tend to tuck under actually have very poor tone in the pelvic floor. So it's not the case that getting that spaciousness in the base of the pelvis, getting that sense of opening that diamond of the pelvis is kind of against the idea of engaging pelvic floor. That's not the case. Actually, people who have a very restricted pelvic floor are often the ones who have a less functional pelvic floor. So we want to try and get a kind of healthy tone in the base of the pelvis. And really that starts from being able to create space in the base of the pelvis and engage it as appropriate, as is appropriate. So I've been playing with that even as I'm teaching. I notice I also have a tendency to kind of grip in the pelvis, and so I just wanted to put it out there as an idea that perhaps when you're teaching a client or you're sitting on the tube or on the bus or whatever, that maybe we actually get a little bit more sense of what's happening in the base of the pelvis and how we can actually support ourselves better or align ourselves better by just creating a little more space there. Okay, bye.